So those were really long this week.
I know.
Yeah.
I was telling my roommate last night, they just keep getting longer and longer.
Yeah.
I know, I saw it and I was like, oh, it's going to be shorter this week. I started writing it. It's not going to
So I know because there was like less reading.
Yeah.
But there was still.
Yeah, there
a
were
lot
fewer
to read.
readings, but they were longer. So.
I didn't know if we were supposed to do the questions for the video for every video because it was like for all 3 videos do this.
Right.
Oh,
I saw your post and I
Yeah.
was like,
I just did it for one because it seemed like it was more directed towards the third video.
I didn't know which one it was like directed at.
I know,
so
it
I
was
wrote
confusing.
about the like grocery store
Yeah,
one,
that's the one.
and I was just like, I think this is.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I didn't know which one it was directed at either, so then I went back to what you guys had posted. And I
Yeah.
was like, I'm just going to talk about that one.
Yeah.
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 Hopefully that was right.
Oh my gosh, I was like, if I were in that situation, I would have gone off on that person.
Yeah.
Like, no joke, because I'm not very shy when it comes to like talking to people about what they're saying and like how problematic it is. So I would have just like yelled at her or him, whichever actor you're talking about.
Yeah.
But
I know, I feel like I probably would have said something, but then like the instant I said something, my heart would have started racing.
Yeah,
so
same.
fast.
Yeah,
I hate that feeling.
I know. But at the same time, like, you feel like if you don't say something, then it's worse because this person, like, the person with the disability feels like nobody's like there for them. Like they don't have a support system through their community, and I feel like that would be such a sucky thing to feel.
Yeah.
Even though this was staged, obviously, like I've heard people talk like that, like not to somebody's face, but like especially in middle school, like behind people's backs and stuff, and then I would call them out on it. But it's so hard, especially at that age, because you like want to be cool and fit in, but like can't do that, you know.
Well, and then if you don't say anything, then the person who's saying the rude things thinks that it's okay.
Yeah, and they're getting away with it, you know. Like using the R word, I cannot stand it. It bothers me so much. I remember when I was, I think in like 10th grade or something, my sister said it in front of me, like she was talking to one of her friends, and I like went off on her. I went off on her, and I was just like, that is so disrespectful. It's a derogatory term. She's like, well, I wasn't using it that way. Like, I didn't mean it like that. But it's like, historically, that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's like using the N word, you know?
Right.
It's like a word that's meant to isolate people and make them feel inferior.
Right.
And so I just think it's like, you have to be mindful when you're using words, you know? Like, any words, but especially if you're going to use, like, words like that.
Yeah.
Like, why are you using them? Like, think about why you're using them and what it means. Like, what it actually means. Not just, like, in your culture or, like, even if it's acceptable to some people that are around you. But, like, is this going to hurt somebody? Maybe not directly, but, you know, it's still perpetuating that stigma against people with disabilities.
Yeah. Do you think, like, because sometimes if I don't know the person or don't know them very well and they're saying, like, rude things about, like, a marginalized group of people, sometimes I'll, like, give them a look, you know, of, like, that offended me.
Yeah.
I didn't
I
really
do
like
that
how
too,
you said
yeah.
that or whatever. Do you think that that's, like, just as okay, or do you think you should speak up and say something?
I would speak up. It's just, it's really hard. Like I got a new job a few weeks ago, and it's an older man and his son, and they're like really cool. But like the first day I worked there, I noticed they said it a lot, and I just had no idea how to say anything because it was like my boss on the very first day of work. I was like, if I say something, I might get fired. Like I don't know. And he was trying to. Like, I work with my friend, and when he said it, she was like, that's offensive, but she was still kind of smiling because it's, like, our boss.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, it's not offensive because I'm saying it to someone who's not a retard. And I was like,
no!
dying inside.
Right. It's kind of like how, have you ever heard like some white people be like, well, it's okay for me to say the N-word if there's no black people around? It's kind of like that. It's like,
no,
it's still just as offensive.
Yeah. And like, I feel like if it was like in that type of context, like, I feel like kind of like you kind of get heated up about it. But like, if you don't really know the person, like, they could just like have grown up with it and it's like so normal to them.
Yeah.
So you don't really want to like get into this full heated argument
Yeah.
with them, just because like to them it's completely normal, and sometimes they don't even catch themselves saying it.
Yeah.
Because like I knew someone who was totally like that. Like they just grew up with it. It was like totally normal. And like as they got older, they're like, oh gosh, like I'm not supposed to say it, but then it's like it's still normal. It's like ingrained in them. But they just like it comes out.
Yeah.
Sometimes they truly just don't understand.
Yeah. It's like ignorance versus like purposefully using like a word that's hurtful. And I remember when people would say that's so gay, and it's the same principle.
Yeah.
You're using a word and making it derogatory, even if it wasn't meant to be in the first place. It has become that, and it's not okay.
Right.
You know?
And I guess if you, like now that I'm thinking about it, I guess if you just give someone a look, then they're like, well, what was that look for? Like, what did that mean? What if they really didn't know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't really tell them anything.
Yeah.
Do that.
It reminds me of when the whole thing happened with the yik yak thing, and my dad was wondering, and it was funny because we're people of color, and he was like, well, why do you have to say a person of color rather than like, I don't remember what else he said, and then I got really mad at him, but he literally, because I thought he was like playing devil's advocate or something, but he like really just didn't know, and I felt so bad. He was like, I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like the language for like other generations, it has changed so much. It's always changing, and so it is really confusing. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but for Compass to Campus, we just now have to give. You're fine. To be like recognized nationally as a mentoring program, we have to give our mentees, so the kids that we work with, we have to give them an end of the quarter survey, and on there they had to check which like race they were, and there was Negro on there, and it was created by our boss, and like she just didn't know because that's.
Is she like older?
Yeah. So anyway, so we had to go in and say like that's not the language that we feel comfortable like giving to our mentees, and she was super apologetic and stuff, but just like language changes over time, and so you just have to be like mindful like when you're talking to older people and be like, oh, like that's changed. That's not appropriate anymore.
Oh, that really surprises me because I know her, so it's like I just didn't even think that was a possibility.
I know.
Oh my gosh. It's like,
and people are usually really apologetic in that situation because they just really don't know. And so she was super apologetic and was like, we'll change it, like, I'm sorry, stuff, but it had been passed out to some kids, so,
Yeah, that's a problem. That's like my Nana, my dad's mom. She'll say Oriental, and I'm just like, no. And I'm like, I always tell people what our Asian American Cultural Studies teacher told us. She was like, you better not be calling anything Oriental unless it's a vase or a rug. And I was like, yes, thank you. But it's just so hard because like that's the language that generation used. And so it's like, like you really have to be careful about that and like keep up with what is appropriate, you know, like I think right now, like going back to the stuff we've been focusing on this week, like being able to use person first language and like knowing what is and isn't acceptable, like terms wise, when you're referring to someone, like you need to be aware of those things because you don't want to alienate people.
Right. I had a question about that actually. So, in the article about like what to avoid and what to choose when you're like getting books, it said like to avoid like poor language, and a lot of those made sense, like crazy, sick, dumb, those kinds of things made a lot of sense. But special, like when we refer to it as like special ed or like that person has special needs, like is that different?
I think that's different because if you say like that person is special,
Yeah.
you know, because then it's like it becomes a derogatory term.
Okay. This is the topic that I know the least amount, so I was really glad that she included that.
Yeah, definitely. You learn about it in SPED 364, which is a class that like all Woodring
the best
teachers.
class.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's really nice. It's a really good overview of like teaching special education, or even just like working with a special education teacher as a general education student, and like how you can help your students best, and like what steps you should take to help them. And like it has a lot of things about like don't assume things, which I felt like was a huge thing that I noticed this week. And like in Wonder, when people assumed that like what like had like the genetic like disorder that he had was like contagious, or that he like I don't know, like he was gross because of the way that he looked, or there was something wrong with his brain.
Yeah, like how the mom sent that email. It's like, this is
Yeah.
not an inclusive school.
Yeah, and it's like, well,
he's not
a special education student. Like, he doesn't have special needs. He just looks different than other people. Yeah. So, that mom made me so mad. I was just like, if I were a teacher and I was like hearing language like that from a parent, I don't know what I would do.
I know.
Like, how do you talk to parents when they're like using language like that? And I feel like that could be a muddy question, because like how do you approach that, because you want to maintain a good relationship with all of your students.
How do you stay like professional?
Yeah, when something offends you, or
is that 12 minutes? I think.
Yeah.
12:54.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just feel like that's a really difficult situation to be in, because like I wouldn't know how to handle that.
And I don't know what you guys thought about that one conflict between like where they pulled in the parents, and like the principal was like talking to them, and they had like that big gathering, and how the parents were like, I don't like how the principal handled it, and to an extent, I don't know if I did either.
Yeah.
Just because I felt like he was kind of segregating Julian of like, I know what he did, but like I don't really have proof as to it, and so like I wasn't sure if I quite liked that. I was like, I don't know. I feel like you're using like your own personal emotions to like make this argument, and so like even what you were saying, like how do we handle this? Like I don't even know if I liked how the principal handled it.
Yeah, I don't know either. I thought like, okay, so initially when I was reading it, I thought it was like a pretty good book and everything, but then I started thinking about like the readings that we did, and like the end of the book where he gets the award from the school, and and he was like, well, is this just because I am different from other people, and like, because he just sees himself as a regular kid, which he is, but like the principal starts choking up and stuff, and I'm just like, I don't know how to feel about this.
Well, I don't know if it was just because like he was like different.
Yeah, I don't
feel like it was
think
more
it
just like
was.
The way he like handled himself.
Yeah,
which is why he got the award.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. Like that's what it was meant to be. But I also like didn't like how people, like the students, like I understand that you're in middle school and everything, but like the students were so terrible to him. Like so terrible.
I think one of the reasons for that is because they had never interacted with someone that was different. And so, just like, I don't know, I think back to like my middle school and high school, even elementary school experiences, and kids were just mean. And you would see like the special ed students like walking down the hall, and people would just be mean to them. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we don't interact with them on a daily basis. Where it's just so separate.
Yeah. I mean, those parts were really frustrating for me to read. I got really emotional with this whole module. But I guess it's good in a way because it was really real, and I think it was someone, I don't know who supposed to was, but like, it was just so raw that it was uncomfortable to read sometimes.
Yeah.
But you can't sugarcoat it and be like, oh, everyone's nice to these people. Like, in order to educate yourself on this topic, you need to know the other perspectives of different people.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And the book I had read, I'd actually borrowed it from a friend, and she had like the extended version, which had Julian's chapter in it.
Oh.
And I thought it was just part of the book, so I was like, oh, this is cool. And then I realized that it's not part of the book, it's like an extra book. And so I really was in love with that chapter because it did show Julian's perspective. And so he went to Paris for, I don't know if it was the summer or something, he visited his grandma. And he had been writing emails to his professor, like the one he really liked, the writing one. And he wrote back, and he was like, I'm really sorry that you left the school and everything, but I'm thinking maybe, why were you so mean to this kid? And was it perhaps that you were afraid of him? And then he kind of blew it off and was like, oh yeah, I'm not afraid of him, obviously.
Yeah.
But then his grandma told the story of how she, a long time ago, had met this boy who was, I think, paralyzed in his feet or something. I don't remember. And how this whole school segregated him and everything. But it was in a time of war, and so he ended up sheltering her, and she got to know him, and then she ended up having this realization of we were only mean to him because we were afraid of him and we didn't understand him. And so she ended up crying in the story, and then Julian was like, I understand what the principal meant of remorse and everything because I didn't know him and I was afraid of him type of thing.
That's
and
such
so,
an important chapter. I feel like I missed out.
I was the whole chapter of Julian, I was I still don't feel any pity for you. I'm sorry. And then that part hit, and I was just oh my gosh. It was just a whole new perspective, and I really love how it was told.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, that's so cool.
I know, I think back to I don't know, stupid things that I did when I was younger and stuff, or how I would be mean to people, and I'm oh my gosh, I wish I could go back and change that. So that makes me feel for Julian.
So I feel that is the time when you're learning what's acceptable and what's not, and you're pushing those boundaries. In elementary school, it's okay if you slip up because you're learning and people have more patience for you. But in middle school, it's you're testing those boundaries.
Yeah.
And you know what's right and wrong, but you want to
Cool.
push it, and and you want to and you're I don't know, you feel so out of control in your life that you want to control something. And I feel being mean and bullying someone is a way that some people feel they have power or control.
I when my brother was in high school, so I was in 7th grade, maybe 6th or 7th grade. He had this girlfriend, and we got really close with her family, and I wrote about this in my post, but she had a little sister who had special needs. It was called Cry of the Cat syndrome. I'm not sure if you've heard of that before, but she just had interesting movements, and I don't even know how to describe it, but she would squeal when she would get excited, and she used sign language with us and stuff. Yeah, that's it.
Interesting.
But she was just the sweetest little girl, and I was learning sign language, so I would talk with her and stuff. And but a lot of my friends, when they would come over and she would be there, would make fun of her. but not in a way that was like, I don't even know how to explain it. Just like in an elementary school, I don't understand this kind of way. And I would never say anything, but I would always feel uncomfortable. And I just had this like internal conflict, like with myself, like should I say something? But I also don't want my friends to think I'm weird. But does Casey even understand what's going on? And so I just wouldn't say anything. Yeah. But like looking back on that, I'm like, I totally should have said something, or I wish I had the language to say something, or I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of times I feel like I'm scared of approaching a topic like that just because I don't know, because I'm like so emotionally riled up that I don't know like what to say to like make people think about what they're saying. So I wonder if like there are some ways that like are especially effective in confronting people about like problematic thinking when it comes to disabilities.
Especially like if you can't explain it eloquently, they're just not going to take you seriously.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I'm afraid of too.
Yeah.
You said that you didn't know if Casey even is Casey the sister? Okay. Yeah, watching the Carly's Cafe video was so eye-opening.
Oh my gosh,
like, she literally knows everything. And it's like just simple things like being repeated a question, which are probably things that we would do, or I would do personally.
Yeah.
And just knowing that all of this is going on in her head and she just can't express it. And just little things like not wanting to go out with her sister, or like wanting coffee instead of hot chocolate. It was so crazy.
Well, and then especially that man that was sitting like sort of near her was like looking at her, and she totally saw that. And and you could be like, oh my gosh, she sees and like recognizes when people just stare at her. Like, what is she thinking about that?
That's how it was in Wonder too. Like August knew when people were like looking at him and then looking down, or when they would stare at him when they thought that he wasn't looking.
I mean, naturally you want to be like, oh, they have a disability, like they don't know, it doesn't mean anything to them, but it means so much. And when in the What Would You Do video, when they were talking, when the actors would be saying those things, I was just wondering how he felt inside, even though it was just for a show. Like, the fact that they set it up, I don't know. That's why I didn't like it, but...
Yeah, I didn't like that either, because he's still a person.
Yeah.
Like, just because he's an actor doesn't mean it's like he can just shove it off when he's done.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe he felt like because it was other actors that were working with him, he knew it wasn't real. But on some level, it was real, if that makes sense. Like, you still feel those things emotionally.
Yeah, I mean, because they were saying those things because those are things that people have said before.
Yeah.
Just to hear them repeated in such harsh ways.
Yeah.
They did it for like 2 days, right?
I don't know.
To hear it all day.
Right. Would be really hard. I think about, like, if I was in that situation and, like, a man was yelling at me for, like, going slow because I was, like, a woman or something, or, like, taunting me for, like, being a woman.
Yeah.
How would I have felt? And even if that person was an actor, I feel like at the end I would have, like, been emotional, you know, just standing there and, like, going through that.
Yeah.
The way, like, I kind of, like, looked at those, like, at the end, he kind of had, like, a little something to say, and I felt like it was, like, just really important to him to, like, kind of show people, and I felt like that was his main goal. One of the things I didn't like about the video, and I had to actually watch it a couple times in order to actually get it, I know Joy had posted, like, a question for us to think about, like, how the announcer said things, and I was like, I just watched it the first time, I was like, okay, and then I saw the question, I was like, what did he say?
Yeah.
So I rewatched it.
Yeah, so did I.
And then I was like, oh, okay. So, and I didn't really like it because I felt like they were only saying, if it's a person with special needs, we have to defend them.
Yeah.
And, like, they can't do anything about it. And I didn't really like it because I felt like if it's any person, like, special needs are not, like, why wouldn't we say something?
Yeah.
And it's not just because they have special needs that they need to be defended.
Exactly.
And who's to say that they can't defend themselves?
Yeah, that's true.
You should be empowering them to be able to defend themselves.
Yeah. I think it's hard when someone's nonverbal, like Carly or Jason was in Rules, for them to really be able to defend themselves.
Right.
So I feel like that's definitely a time that other people need to speak up. But also, like, just knowing that people with disabilities are human beings too,
Right.
you know? And a lot of them are just like us, you know, because we're all part of the same, like, human race.
Right.
And so I feel like it's very alienating to, like, treat someone badly just because they're different.
Right.
You know, like, that's what we've been doing for centuries, unfortunately. But it's like, this is still one of those things that's considered acceptable in society, which I feel like is so terrible.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking about that too during this module. Like, why is it so acceptable that we segregate in our schools?
Yeah.
Like students with special needs. Like, why is that okay?
Yeah.
Still.
Mm-hmm. Like, I'm for full integration because it's, like, proven to be beneficial for both the students who have special needs and the students who are in the general education classroom. And I feel like that would be the ideal, is for people to be, like, fully integrated. Obviously, the only exception I would say is if someone is is overstimulated by that environment.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want to put that student in that situation where, like, they feel so overwhelmed that they can't, like, interact with other people or do their work, or, you know, like, when it affects the student with special needs, that's when you need to focus on, like, what do you need, and, like, what's best for you personally, you know.
Well, and ideally, there would be multiple teachers in the classroom.
Yeah,
and
that's
the
true.
classroom would be smaller.
And parent educators, and yeah, definitely.
In my high school, we had a peer mentoring program, which was, so we did have a life skills classroom, but then there were certain electives, certain classes where they could choose what they wanted to be in, but then they'd have a mentor with them in that classroom, which was really cool. So I worked with a student who had autism, and it was pretty minor, but, like, you could still tell. And he wanted to take video production, so I sat with him in that class, and we did that together. And I thought it was a really cool way to include them in the classroom, because it's, like, one-on-one time in a subject that might have been a little bit more difficult, because I could tell it was challenging for him just knowing things like how to search on a computer, or, like, where to put the clicker and stuff. But it was really cool, and I think my high school had we were generally people were really nice to this life skills students. I didn't really see anything bad happening, but then I also, when looking at that article, how it said the whole tokenism thing and, like, seeing them as heroes, looking back, I don't know if a lot of it was sincere. And then there were also, like, the popular students with special needs, because they were really funny and really outgoing. But then the students who were stemming a lot, which I had no idea what that was, you could tell that people didn't gravitate towards them to talk to them. But I just thought it was interesting how I was like, oh, my high school, we had a really good experience. But then, was that any of it genuine?
Yeah, that's interesting. I really liked hearing Carly explain about stemming.
Oh my gosh,
oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And just her even relating it to, like, us and what we do every day too. I was like, whoa, that's crazy.
Because for some people who have autism, things are, like, heightened. Like, all of your senses are really heightened. And so that's why people get overwhelmed, because, like, they can't take in all this information at one time. And that's, like, why people use coping mechanisms like rocking or, like, self-soothing in other ways. And I feel like if we tried to explain that a little bit more to students, or tried to give them a better understanding of people with special needs, then they might be more likely to treat them with more kindness. I don't know.
Like if these kinds of videos were shown in like younger classes and stuff, and like especially at the Carly's Cafe, like this is her experience on a day to day, and then the students would understand, like, oh, okay, this is what she goes through, this is her perspective. Or the teacher that we have for 401 was saying that she reads Wonder to her 4th grade class every year, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome. Like, that's such a beneficial book to read as like a young student.
I saw that they all made covers for it.
Yeah, so cute.
Just with the whole stemming thing and how hearing about her explanation just shed so much light on so many things, and thinking about how we think that people with special needs or disabilities are so different from us, but really they have an explanation for everything they're doing, and really it's so similar to us. It's just a different way of handling things or responding to their brains, and like there's still so much more that we don't know about.
Yeah.
And I can't, like, I was so amazed that I was hearing about stemming for the first time.
Yeah.
Like my big overall, I think, evaluate thing was just like on how we perceive things, because like really when she was talking about the stemming, it was just like she was saying that their way of stemming is just socially unacceptable.
Exactly.
And so I was like, it really is just how we perceive things. Like we're doing it too. It's just we think it's
the same.
We think it's just socially okay. And that was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting that we pick up on those things too at such like a young age and stuff. Like how she was saying, like twirling your hair and stuff.
Yeah.
Like I do that, but without even thinking about it, and I've done that like my whole life. And I'm like, whoa, how did I pick that up without somebody just telling me to do that?
It's like coping mechanisms. Like people will like bite their fingernails, or for me, one of the ways that I notice that I stim is because I have ADHD, like I have a lot of energy, and so I need to get it out through my body. And so I'll like shake my legs like this, or like get up and walk around if I need to. And I feel like we should have the classroom be a space where like students do what they need to do to like be active in their learning, as long as it's not like interrupting class time, or like the other students understand what's going on, so they learn to just like accept it and not be distracted by it.
Yeah, I think that's really important, but I'm wondering how you find a balance between letting them do everything they need to.
Yeah.
I'm tutoring this kid, and he like is really pushing his limits now. He's like, I need gum to concentrate, I need this pen to click, or now I need this toy to squeeze, and it's become like him holding his Nerf gun, and I'm like, you do not need your Nerf gun right now. And his parents are like, no, he does not need any of those things. But then really we don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But then it's just like, if you give every student the opportunity, how far are they going to go? Which is, I feel like, it's a question for all of education. There's always that, like, you want to do this, but what is this going to mean for the classroom?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm putting that down
Yeah.
so many questions.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
have no idea. Like, how far is too far, and then how do you know when students are taking advantage of that?
I feel like if you set the rules and you set the boundaries from like straight off the bat, then like, and if you come up with a list of acceptable like ways of like dealing with your extra energy or whatever it might be, then the student feels like they have a choice, but you're also setting that limit of like, this is what is okay to do like in this class time right now, you know? And there's so many like tools and things out there for students, like especially I think ADHD students, because more and more people are being diagnosed with that. Or sorry, students with ADHD. And so I feel like they're like like there are cushions for chairs and things like that. It's just you need to be able to like ask for what you need from the school, and like especially if the student has an IEP, then that opens up like more opportunities. So
I forget which one it was now. I think it was the like integrated arts class where you cover all of them. And I took that this summer, and she was telling me about, you guys might already know this story, but she was telling me about this classroom that she was in one time, and the teacher had just like a box in the back of the room, and she was like, "Oh, hey, can I grab that box to like get some more stuff out of my car?" And the teacher was like, "No, that box needs to stay in the back of the room." And she was like, "Alright, like that's kind of weird." And anyway, she ended up asking her like, "Why does that box need to stay in the back of the room?" And there was this student with, I think he had ADHD, but I'm not really sure. And he just needed to get energy out every now and then. And so if he just had too much energy that he couldn't concentrate, he would ask a friend who was already done with their work to get in the box, and he would push the box back and forth in the room.
So cool.
And like, until he was like, had like burned enough energy out of his.
Wow.
That's so awesome, though.
One time, it started because he was like distracting a whole bunch of kids, and he was just like being super wild, and the teacher was like super frustrated, was like, like just, you know what, you get in the box, like push him back and forth, and then it just worked, and like, he was like pushing him back and forth, and then he was like, okay, I'm ready to get back to work now, and the teacher was like, all right, I'm gonna try that again. Like, we'll see how it goes. But isn't that a good idea? I'm like, I'm gonna have a box in my classroom when I'm a teacher.
That's awesome.
It's very creative.
Yeah, it is.
I would have never thought about that on my own. Get in the box and let him push you back and forth.
Oh, one of the things I was thinking about is in the reading this week, it talked about how a lot of teachers don't have books in the classroom that like involve students with disabilities in like a positive light, but also not labeling them as like heroes if they're able to do the things that like other students are able to do. And so I was wondering about not necessarily books, because I think it's just great to have those in your classroom for everybody, you know, because it makes people think outside of what they know to like what is out there in the world and what other people are experiencing. But I was wondering about like things like the box in the back of the classroom. Like, do you just like prepare that for your students every year, or do you come up with it as you go? Like, what's the best way to do that? Because I feel like if you try to anticipate a child's needs, like the needs might not be what you're expecting, you know, just based on like a diagnosis. You know, everybody has different needs, and so I don't know, I guess that's just my question. Like, do you prepare for it ahead of time, or do you wait and like see what the child needs over time?
Yeah, I thought about that too. There's, in the first grade class that I'm in right now, there's this student with special needs, and he has like a chart of like what happens in the day on his desk, and I'll be like, okay, Kenny, we're going to lunch now, and anyway, he like can point at like what part of the day that he's at and stuff. And I was thinking, like, that might make him feel different from the other students. Like, maybe all of the other students should have that, too.
Yeah.
But then again, I was thinking, and like, once they go on to second grade, are they going to feel dependent on that?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. I think, honestly, after watching Carly's Cafe, that video, I'm just so confused about what the right thing to do is as a teacher. Because, like, if you might think a student needs that, what if they don't? What if that's actually making them feel like inferior or whatever? Or you might think that all of these strategies are really good to use, but you just don't know how it makes them feel.
Yeah.
It's just,
and nobody asks them.
Yeah.
Like, nobody asked Kenny, like, how would it make you feel if you had this on there? And and if they did, like, was he honest with them? I don't know.
Yeah, and sometimes students don't even know what they need.
Yeah.
And, like, it can help to talk to parents and be like, what's worked for you in the past, you know? Because then it's something that they're familiar with. Like, it's a way of, like, a coping mechanism or something to help them, like, stim in maybe a way that's, like, more productive, if that makes sense. I don't know. But, like, if there are things that the parents know about the student that would really help you to have that student, like, be successful in your classroom, then wouldn't you want to do that, you know?
And it's kind of, it makes me think of Carly, too, with that, that technology that they gave her to help her speak, because that was really beneficial.
Oh, yeah.
And you could tell that she, like, enjoyed using that and stuff. And so I think, I don't know what I'm really saying.
I think like with your question, I feel like you should always have like this like list of things you could use.
Yeah.
You never know when it's going to
That's true, that's true.
But like you also don't know what your students are going to need every single year. And so like everything that you have on your list could never, like, it may not work.
Yeah.
And so you just really do need to get to know your student and find out what they need. But I don't think it would hurt to have like this preset list
definitely.
of things.
Yeah.
I mean, even just the list of things that we learned instead.
Yeah.
So many resources.
Oh, yeah. They're out there. It's just like, I feel like some teachers feel overwhelmed when it comes to like being able to help their students with special needs, because like they don't work with students with special needs every single day, you know? And I feel like that's where partnerships with the special education teachers are really important, because like the strategies that they use when working with their kids and things like that can be really useful for general ed teachers in the classroom. So, yeah.
I had a question about rules, and I wrote down all their names because I could not keep all the characters straight this week for some reason. But with Jason, when we first like met Jason in the book, he said he like told Catherine that he didn't want to be alive, and that made me think about the article that we read too. About like avoiding like portraying them living sad lives, and it's not that he really lived a sad life, but it's just that he felt really sad about his life, and I just wanted to like ask you guys how you felt.
I actually read your post on that, and I kind of feel like kind of what Lex was saying earlier, like you kind of do just need to tell it how it is sometimes, like just be really raw about it. But I think because the book was not just about him, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die, my life is so horrible, like all this stuff. Like that was his thought process when everyone around him was just like, "Hi, Jason."
Oh, that was so annoying.
I mean, students are, or like just people in general are gonna feel that way, and I think it's really important just to put it out there. But like, because the whole book wasn't on that, like. It did change his perspective, and that does happen. You go through these phases in life, and so I think that's why I kind of like it wasn't like that big of a deal. Almost like it wasn't just like, oh my gosh, I want to kill myself.
That's how I interpreted it too.
I think it just like kind of hit me because it's, I don't know, it made me feel sad.
It is super hard to evaluate. One of the things I mentioned about how... Sorry, I have to think about this for a minute. You guys can talk.
That's okay.
Did you guys struggle with reading rules a little bit? Because I know in some parts I was just kind of almost lost in the book. Like, I don't know if it was just like the writing of how it was, but I just kept like having to reread some of it. And I'm not sure if it was just like how I was reading it, or if it was just the book in general. But I don't know, when I was reading it, I was just like, what? and I had to reread it, and then I just kind of was thinking about students of like who do get lost in books, and like
that's me all the time. It's so bad.
So I mean, like I just wasn't sure if it was just the way I was reading it, and like I just wasn't reading it well.
Yeah, I don't know. I take a really long time to read if I'm like really focusing on a book. Then I don't do that, but sometimes like I mentally check out and just like start thinking about other things, and so I feel like that's a pretty normal thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't necessarily feel that way with Rose. I did feel like it was a lot younger than like the other books that we have read, and so I didn't even really know. I'm so sorry. I couldn't even really tell how old Catherine was because
she was 12.
Yeah, 12 or 13.
Because I think I like missed that or something. Because I just felt like she was really young for some reason. I don't know why.
I noticed some parallels between the two books, like the older sisters having younger brothers, and like that dynamic, and how both older sisters felt like the world revolved around their brothers because their brothers had special needs. And I feel like, well, except August didn't really have special needs.
It's so hard to
yeah, I know. It's like, I feel like this is one of the things I struggled with. Like, I don't know how to address his like differences. Because I was like, I don't want to say deformity, but that's the only word I have for it. I was like, I don't know. But anyways, so correcting that part of what I was saying, how like the parents mostly focused on their younger brothers because of like the situations they were in, and how they felt like they both had to like stand up for their younger brothers, and I don't know. I just thought it was interesting because then you see that like the siblings' perspective of what's going on too. So
have you ever seen Parenthood?
Yes.
I love that show.
Oh, I love that show
Max,
too.
And I liked that they showed like Hattie's perspective and how she dealt with that and stuff. Anyway, that's just one.
Yeah, no, I love that show. It shows so many different family dynamics, and I really like it.
Did you remember what you were gonna say?
Yeah. So what I thought a little bit about was exposure and how like the sisters or the families treated August and Jason and David just through their exposure of knowing them, like how Catherine didn't really give them special treatment just because she was closer to them, and that made me think of the videos and how the people responded to the actors.
Yeah.
And like there was a teacher who worked with special needs.
Yeah.
There was someone who had a sister, and then there's someone else who knew another worker with special needs, and it was just interesting to make that connection between these people work with special needs, and they responded in a certain way. So like the teacher responded with empathy and like asking him how he would feel and stuff like that. So that was my connection to the books, and just how different it was for people who had exposure to the characters versus who it was so rare to.
Yeah.
One of the things I hated was how the people who were like trying to defend the check stand worker, how they would say he's somebody's brother or he's somebody's son or like things like that, and it was like, no, he's a human being. Like this is just common decency.
Right.
Like it has nothing to do with being somebody's sister or brother or like whatever. It's just being a decent person to everyone.
Right.
You know, that's the point.
I think what maybe they like meant by that was just like how would you feel if that was your brother or your sister or whatever.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I got out of it too, because like them just being a human obviously wasn't enough for the
Yeah.
people who were criticizing them. It was
That's
like at that like they don't care apparently, so like just kind of trying to relate it to the people who are criticizing them.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like do you have brothers? Do you have sisters? And so that's kind of how I took it.
Well, and obviously they can't put themselves in that perspective because number one, they've never been around somebody like that maybe, and number two, they've never experienced that, and so maybe just like comparing it to like, well, do you have a sibling or something? I don't know, something like that would be more helpful.
Yeah.
In that way.
But it was also like talking about him in front of him.
Yeah.
That is one of my biggest pet peeves. Is like people who, and the person who worked with Jason in the book, she would like yell things, and he was like, "My hearing is fine, lady." Like, oh, she was so irritating, and how she would talk. Yeah, she would talk to his mom and not him, even though he had this communication system, and she would be like, "How's he doing today?" Right in front of him. Like that's
right
so. That's so humiliating.
Or I took American Sign Language in high school, and people, it's like amazing how many people yell at people who are deaf, and like no matter how loud you talk, they still can't hear you. Like I said, that's one of my biggest pet peeves.
That's the other thing about exposure. What when the lady was like shouting at him, it made me think of this girl was teaching an art lesson yesterday, and I don't think she usually works with the little ones, but she was like really babying them, and I was just like, it makes sense if you don't have exposure to them, you're gonna talk in that way. So that's what I thought about.
That's that's another pet peeve is like when people talk down to children, or in this case teenagers. Like Jason was like what, 15?
Yeah.
Like you're talking to him like he is 3 years old.
Yeah.
That is so offensive. You know, like how do you not know that if you worked with people with special needs all day?
Right.
You know.
I remember, this is so funny that I have this memory, but I was like 3 years old, and I was at the preschool that I was at, and these older kids, they must have been like 5 or 6, were like walking by all of us, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, those are the cutest babies." And I remember being like turning to my friend and being like, "I'm not a baby, I'm a toddler. Like this is ridiculous."
I'm sure you said it just like that. Yeah, my sister was like that when she was like a baby. Like when she first started talking, she was like, "Baby, baby!" Like she was so fascinated with babies.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Like she wasn't a baby herself.
Yeah. So funny. Yeah. And I think I already told you guys this story, but when I was really little, I said really loudly, of course, I was like, "Mom, why is that man in a wheelchair?"
Oh,
And little kids just say stuff like that because they have no filter. And my mom was like, "Why don't you go talk to him?" And so that was one of the things that taught me, like, people who look different on the outside, like, don't necessarily, like, they're not different from, like, you and me on the inside, you know? So, I don't know. I feel like that's a really important lesson to teach kids. And obviously, like, I think it said this in one of the articles, and you can tell from, like, reading Wonder, like, if someone has a physical deformity, like, I think it's more of a touchy subject, because they are more alienated, I think, from society. So I thought it was interesting how, like, Summer asked him eventually, like, "Can I ask you, like, why you look the way you look?" And then he was comfortable with it because he had built this relationship with her. But when you have complete strangers, like, staring at you and they're just like, "What's wrong with you?" Then that's different from, like, a little kid who doesn't know any better going up to someone and being like, "Why are you in a wheelchair?" You know, like, even though it might still be, like, a touchy subject for people, they're going to understand if it's a really little kid, you know?
Yeah, your story kind of reminds me of wondering how, like, they were at the park.
And,
like, the boys were just, like, staring and, like, saying, and the babysitter was like, "We're going." But, like, really, when they went back home, they were like, "We didn't do anything wrong. We were just, like, making, you know, like, we were just questioning." And so it is, like, they... You know, they didn't know, but... And
I thought it was funny how the babysitter immediately was like, "I handled that the wrong way." Like, she knew immediately. She was like, "Well, we shouldn't have done that."
Yeah.
Because, like, in that moment, like, she explained this, like, later on, she was like, in that moment, I just didn't want, like, the little brother to say anything because she was afraid that he would, like, hurt the little boy's feelings. And so she was, like, trying to prevent that by, like, running away. And instead it could have, like, potentially made August feel worse about, like, that situation. So I think it's so hard to, like, I don't know, especially with little kids, because you want to, like, be their filters for them, but that's not always gonna work. So sometimes you just have to, like, be the adult in the situation and, you know, talk to the kids about, like, how people look different. Everybody looks different. And some people are just more different than others.
It kind of reminds me of, like, whenever, and this isn't my parents' fault, but when I was little and I would ask questions about race, like, my parents would shush me. And then I grew up thinking, like, we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
And
Like, it's taboo.
it's kind of like that. Like, if you see someone with special needs, you should talk to your kids about it or encourage them to talk with the person instead of about them.
Definitely.
My roommate from last year, she had, like, severe kidney failure, and she was, like, waiting for a transplant, and so before she, like, before she had a transplant and stuff, her eyes were turning yellow, and her skin was turning yellow and stuff, and one time she went to the mall, and this old woman just, like, walked up to her and was like, "What's wrong with you? Are you okay?"
Oh my gosh.
And she just, like, burst into tears and went home, and for, like, the rest of the year, before she got a transplant, she basically, like, shut herself in her room and, like, would only go to class. But it's because people were so rude to her, and when they really had no idea, like, what was going on.
Yeah.
That's what made me think of, like, wonder.
One of the wonders I have is thinking about Catherine and how some people might have thought she was harsh in some moments, or, like, how she just had a set of rules that David had to follow. And I'm wondering what is the balance between treating someone normally versus treating them the way you think they should be treated because they have a disability.
Yeah.
And I was watching this movie. It's really good. I forgot what it's called. Like The Road Within or something. And it was about these three kids at a mental institution. So one had anorexia, one was OCD, and then one had Tourette's. And, like, obviously people treat them differently, or they don't ask them questions, or, like, they give them special circumstances. And what helped them cope with their illness was that they stole the lady's car who owns the place, and they went on a road trip together, and they were just...
Oh, I think is that on Netflix?
Yeah, I totally heard of that. You should watch it, it's so good, it's really funny. But they just treated each other normally, like, didn't give anyone special circumstances at all, and just to see how being treated in that way as just a human with emotions just as anyone else, like, brought so much. It was really cool to watch. So I'm just wondering, as, like, a teacher, how do you find that balance? Or, like, as someone trying to learn about it, how do you know? Because you want to treat them normally, and then there are things that you don't want to say, but is it okay to just say them?
Yeah. I think with, like, Catherine's situation, David, I think, maybe is, like, on a place in the autism spectrum where, like, there are some people with autism that really love to have rules and guidelines. And so if you set a time, then they mean that exact time. And so when the dad was late all the time, then he would get his hopes up because he was like, oh, it's going to be 5 o'clock. It's going to be exactly 5 o'clock. And then it was never exactly 5 o'clock. And then he, like, would have a meltdown. And that's because, like, some people with autism just love having structures. And so rules are, like, really helpful to them. I've worked with a little boy who was on the autism spectrum, and my sister would babysit him during the summers because I would work different jobs, and so he would like ask if they could go to McDonald's, and then she'd be like, sure, like let's do that today, and then they wouldn't be able to do it for some reason, and he would freak out. And it's just like, if you're gonna promise something, you better fulfill it, you know. And that's like on the other person, that's not on the child who has autism, because like that's how their world works, that's what makes sense to them. So I feel like you should be like addressing that need in that way, if that makes sense. And I don't know, I just think it totally depends on the student, which is always like what people say, and it's so hard because it'd be so much easier if everyone just fit in a little box and like, oh, you have this diagnosis, this is what we're gonna do, you know. But that's not the way it works.
I know. I feel like I always get frustrated because in Woodring we talk about all of these problems, but then there are no like actual solutions. I get frustrated, but then I'm like, there's no way to know. And we have class together, and a lot of us asked about how to do writer's workshop, and with regards to ELLs. And the teachers didn't know. And I almost started tearing up because I was like, you have to tell us something. And it's like, how could you? Everyone's different.
And everyone's on a different level and stuff. How do you, like, what your question made me think of is, like, how do you make sure that you're being equitable to all of your students and stuff without being overly equitable? I don't know. I really don't know.
I think as a teacher, the reality of the situation is you focus on the students that have the highest needs. Because if you're working in a classroom with like 30 or 35 students, which has happened in my like elementary experience, I've been in classes where it was like a ton of little kids, and like the kids that have the highest needs are the ones that need you the most to help them with their learning. And like, as sad as that is, because then I feel like the kids who are maybe like higher achieving don't get as much attention, but at the same time, it's like, obviously they are on track already. Like, they're going to be successful in their learning. And, you know, you continue to help them be successful by challenging them. But I feel like our duty as teachers is to attend to the kids who need the most help, you know. So I don't know, it's hard, it's a hard reality, because you want to be able to teach to every one of your students. Like, in an ideal world, we'd be able to. But I think along the way, you just figure out what works for each student, and then, like, who needs that one-on-one time, who is better working in a group, who's better, like, independently, and then you work with those things, you know. And it's not something you're going to know right away.
One thing,
obviously.
the kid I tutor, I was talking to his dad, and he was talking about how he volunteers in the classroom like once a month. And I was talking, we discussed like how he was having a lot of trouble with writing, and I haven't done a lot of work with writing, so I was wondering what I should do, or like what writing even looks like in the classroom. And then he was like, it's a shit show. Because the teacher works with the kids who need the most help, but then everyone else who is kind of on track, they just don't get anything. And he was like, it's a zoo in there. And
that's frustrating.
What do you do? Because when you're the teacher, you have to focus on those kids.
Man, that's hard. I feel like when you like have more experience, you'll just get better at it as the years go on. But in your first year, it's like, I don't know.
I think Rob Brand said, like, you're going to be a mess your first few years teaching or something like that, because that's just, like, what Rob would say. But he's just like, don't expect to be perfect. You're not going to be. And, like, no teacher is perfect, but you learn along the way, you know?
I was telling my group in 401 last night, I was reading this article about, like, reasons why not to get engaged your first year of teaching. And I was like, oh my god, that's so stressful, and all this stuff. 27. I was like, well, I'm gonna be like 25 at that point, so. I really, yeah, I know, I really sorry. Cut it short, but I have to go too.
All right.